Mr. Arthur Sterling was not asleep. His eyes were closed, his breathing heavy and rhythmic, his frail body slumped deep into the burgundy velvet of his favorite armchair. To anyone watching, he looked like a harmless old man drifting into an afternoon nap. But under those eyelids, Arthur was wide awake. His mind was sharp, calculating, and waiting. This was a game Arthur played often. At 75 years old, he was one of the wealthiest men in the city. He owned hotels, shipping lines, technology firms. He had everything a man could dream of, except for one thing: trust. Over the years, Arthur had become bitter. His children only visited when they wanted something. His business partners smiled to his face, but sharpened their knives behind his back. Even his staff had stolen from him: silver spoons, cash from his wallet, rare wines. Arthur had grown to believe that every human being on earth was greedy. He believed that if you gave a person a chance to take something without getting caught, they would take it. Today, he was going to test that theory again. On the small mahogany table right next to his hand, he had placed a thick envelope. It was open. Inside was a stack of $100 bills totaling $5,000, enough money to change a poor person's life for a month. It was visibly spilling out, looking like it had been carelessly forgotten by a senile old man. Outside, rain poured down like bullets against the glass windows. Inside, the fire crackled warmly. Arthur heard the door handle turn. His newest maid, Sarah, walked in. She'd only been working at the Sterling mansion for 3 weeks. She was young, perhaps in her late 20s, but her face looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes told a story of sleepless nights and constant worry. Arthur knew from her background check that Sarah was a widow. Her husband had died in a factory accident 2 years ago, leaving her with nothing but debts and a 7-year-old son named Leo. Today, the schools were closed for emergency repairs due to the storm. Sarah had no money for a babysitter. She'd begged to bring her son to work, promising he'd be silent as a mouse. Arthur heard soft footsteps, then lighter, smaller ones. A child. "Stay here, Leo," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "Sit in that corner. Don't move. Don't touch anything. Don't make a sound. Mr. Sterling is sleeping. If you wake him up, Mommy will lose her job, and we won't have anywhere to sleep tonight. Do you understand?" "Yes, Mommy," a small, gentle voice replied. Sarah's footsteps hurried away. The door clicked shut. Now it was just the billionaire and the boy. For 5 long minutes, there was only silence. The crackling fire, the ticking grandfather clock. Arthur kept his breathing steady, but he was listening intensely. He expected the boy to start exploring, to break something, to touch what he shouldn't. Poor kids, Arthur assumed, were naturally hungry for things they didn't have. But Leo didn't move. Then Arthur heard it, the soft rustle of fabric. The boy was standing up. Here we go, Arthur thought. The little thief is making his move. He heard small footsteps approaching his chair. Slow, hesitant, coming closer. Arthur knew exactly what the boy was looking at. The envelope. $5,000 sitting right there, inches from Arthur's hand. A 7-year-old would know what money was, would know it could buy toys, candy, food. Arthur visualized it clearly. The boy would reach out, grab the cash, shove it into his pocket. Then Arthur would open his eyes, catch him red-handed, and fire the mother immediately. Another lesson learned: never trust anyone. The footsteps stopped. The boy was standing right beside him. Arthur could almost feel the child's breath. But what happened next shocked this cold-hearted billionaire to his core. If you want to see how one small act of kindness changed a billionaire's entire fortune and understand why this 7-year-old boy became the heir to a billion-dollar empire, make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell, because this story will restore your faith in humanity. Arthur waited for the rustle of paper. He waited for the grab. But the grab never came. Instead, Arthur felt something he never expected. A small, cold hand gently touched his arm. The touch was light, barely a feather's weight. Arthur fought the urge to flinch. What is he doing? He wondered. Checking if I'm dead? The boy withdrew his hand. Then Arthur heard a heavy sigh from the child. Mr. Arthur, Leo whispered. It was so quiet, barely audible over the rain. Arthur didn't respond. He snored softly, a fake rumbling snore. The boy shifted. Then Arthur heard a sound that confused him completely. It wasn't the sound of money being taken. It was the sound of a zipper. What is this kid doing? Arthur thought, his mind racing. Is he getting comfortable? Is he going to take a nap too? Then Arthur felt something warm settle over his legs. It was the boy's jacket, a cheap, thin windbreaker, damp from the rain outside, but it was being placed over Arthur's knees like a blanket. The room was drafty. The large windows let in a chill despite the fire. Arthur hadn't realized it, but his hands were actually cold. Leo smoothed the small jacket over the old man's legs with care. Then Arthur heard the boy whisper again. "You're cold," Leo murmured to the sleeping man. "Mommy says sick people shouldn't get cold." Arthur's heart skipped a beat. This was not part of the script. The boy wasn't looking at the money. He was looking at him. Looking at Arthur like he was a person who needed help. Then Arthur heard a rustle on the table. Ah, he thought, here it is. Now that he's lulled me into a false sense of security, he takes the cash. But the money didn't move. Arthur risked opening his left eye just a crack, a millimeter slit hidden by his eyelashes. What he saw shocked him to his core. Leo was standing by the table. He was a small, scrawny kid with messy hair and clothes that were clearly secondhand. His shoes were worn out at the toes. But his face was filled with serious, intense focus. Leo had noticed the envelope hanging dangerously off the edge of the table, looking like it might fall onto the floor. He wasn't stealing it, he was pushing it back toward the center of the table, near the lamp so it wouldn't fall. Then Leo saw something else. On the floor near Arthur's foot was a small leather-bound notebook. It had fallen from Arthur's lap earlier when he sat down. Leo bent down and picked it up. He dusted off the cover with his sleeve. He placed the notebook gently on the table next to the money. "Safe now," Leo whispered. The boy then turned around and walked back to his corner of the rug. He sat down, pulled his knees to his chest, and wrapped his arms around himself. He was shivering slightly. He had given his only jacket to the billionaire, and now he was cold. Arthur lay there, his mind completely blank. For the first time in 20 years, Arthur Sterling didn't know what to think. He had set a trap for a rat, but he had caught a dove. The cynicism that had built up in his heart like a stone wall developed a small crack. Why didn't he take it? Arthur screamed internally. They're poor. I know they're poor. His mother wears shoes with holes in the soles. Why didn't he take the money? This boy, who had nothing, had just given Arthur everything he had. A jacket to keep him warm, protection for his belongings, and he'd asked for nothing. Before Arthur could process this, the heavy library door creaked open again. Sarah rushed in. She was breathless, her face pale with terror. She had clearly run all the way from the dining room. She looked at the corner and saw Leo sitting there, shivering without his jacket. Then she looked at the armchair. She saw her son's dirty, cheap jacket draped over the Billionaire's expensive suit pants. She saw the money on the table. Her hands flew to her mouth. She thought the worst.
She thought Leo had been bothering the master. She thought Leo had tried to steal and then tried to cover it up. "Leo!" she hissed, her voice sharp with panic. She ran to the boy and grabbed him by the arm, pulling him up. "What did you do? Why is your coat on him? Did you touch him? Did you touch that money?" Leo looked up at his mother, his eyes wide and innocent. "No, Mommy, he was shivering. I just wanted to keep him warm. And the paper was falling, so I fixed it." "Oh, God," Sarah cried, tears welling up in her eyes. "He's going to wake up. He's going to fire us. We're ruined, Leo. I told you not to move." Sarah began frantically pulling the jacket off Arthur's legs, her hands shaking so hard she almost knocked over the lamp. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," she was whispering to the sleeping man, even though she thought he couldn't hear her. "Please don't wake up, please." Arthur felt the jacket being ripped away. He felt the mother's terror radiating off her like heat. She wasn't scared of a monster, she was scared of him. scared of the man who had so terrified his staff that a simple act of kindness from a child was seen as a crime. Arthur realized in that moment that he had become a monster. He decided it was time to wake up. Arthur let out a loud, theatrical groan and shifted in his chair. Sarah froze. She clutched Leo to her chest, backing away toward the door. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. Arthur opened his eyes. He blinked a few times, adjusting to the light. He looked at the ceiling, then slowly lowered his gaze to the terrified woman and small boy standing by the door. He put on his best grumpy face. He scowled, his bushy gray eyebrows coming together. "What?" Arthur grumbled, his voice gravelly and harsh. "What is all this noise? Can a man not get some rest in his own house?" I am so sorry, Mr. Sterling," Sarah stammered, bowing her head. I was cleaning. This is my son. I had no choice. The schools were closed. We're leaving right now. Please, sir, don't fire me. I'll take him outside. He won't bother you again. Please, sir, I need this job." Arthur stared at them. He looked at the envelope of money on the table. It was exactly where Leo had pushed it. Safe, secure, untouched. He looked at the boy who was trembling, not from cold anymore, but from fear of the angry old man. Arthur sat up straighter. He reached out and picked up the envelope of money. He tapped it against his palm, slowly, deliberately. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, expecting him to accuse them of trying to steal it. "Boy!" Arthur boomed. Leo peeked out from behind his mother's leg. "Yes, sir," he said in a tiny voice. "Come here," Arthur commanded. Sarah gripped Leo's shoulder tighter. "Sir, he didn't mean to." "I said," Arthur raised his voice, "come here." Leo stepped away from his mother. He walked slowly toward the armchair, his small hands shaking. He stopped right in front of Arthur's knees. Arthur leaned forward, his face inches from the boy's face. He looked deep into Leo's eyes, searching for a lie, searching for the greed he was so sure existed in everyone. "Did you put your jacket on me?" Arthur asked. Leo swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." "Why?" Arthur demanded. "I'm a stranger. I'm rich. I have a closet full of fur coats upstairs. Why would you give me your jacket?" Leo looked down at his shoes, then back up at Arthur. His voice was small but steady. "Because you looked cold, sir. And Mommy says that when someone is cold, you give them a blanket, even if they're rich. Cold is cold." Arthur stared at the boy. Cold is cold. It was such a simple truth, such pure, uncomplicated logic from a child who understood what Arthur had forgotten. Human decency wasn't about wealth or status. It was about seeing someone in need and helping them. Arthur looked at Sarah. She was holding her breath, her face drained of color. "What is your name, son?" Arthur asked, his voice softening just a fraction. "Leo, sir." Arthur nodded slowly. He looked at the money in his hand. Then he looked at the open door of the library. A plan began to form in his mind. The test wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. This boy had passed the first level, the level of honesty. But Arthur wanted to know more. He wanted to know if this was just a fluke, or if this boy truly possessed a heart of gold. He wanted to see if pressure would break them. Arthur shoved the money into his inside jacket pocket. "You woke me up," begun Arthur, returning to his grumpy persona. "I hate being woken up." Sarah let out a small sob. "We're leaving, sir." "No," Arthur said sharply. "We're leaving, sir," Sarah repeated, grabbing Leo's hand and turning toward the door. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. Arthur opened his eyes. He blinked a few times, adjusting to the light. He looked at the ceiling, then slowly lowered his gaze to the terrified woman and small boy standing by the door. He put on his best grumpy face. He scowled, his bushy gray eyebrows coming together. "What?" Arthur grumbled, his voice gravelly and harsh. "What is all this noise? Can a man not get some rest in his own house?" I am so sorry, Mr. Sterling, Sarah stammered, bowing her head. I was cleaning. This is my son. I had no choice. The schools were closed. We're leaving right now. Please, sir, don't fire me. I'll take him outside. He won't bother you again. Please, sir, I need this job. Arthur stared at them. He looked at the envelope of money on the table. It was exactly where Leo had pushed it. Safe, secure, untouched. He looked at the boy, who was trembling, not from cold anymore, but from fear of the angry old man. Arthur sat up straighter. He reached out and picked up the envelope of money. He tapped it against his palm slowly, deliberately. Sarah squeezed her eyes shut, expecting him to accuse them of trying to steal it. "Boy," Arthur boomed. Leo peeked out from behind his mother's leg. "Yes, sir," he said in a tiny voice. "Come here," Arthur commanded. Sarah gripped Leo's shoulder tighter. "Sir, he didn't mean to." "I said," Arthur raised his voice. "Come here." Leo stepped away from his mother. He walked slowly toward the armchair, his small hands shaking. He stopped right in front of Arthur's knees. Arthur leaned forward, his face inches from the boy's face. He looked deep into Leo's eyes, searching for a lie, searching for the greed he was so sure existed in everyone. "Did you put your jacket on me?" Arthur asked. Leo swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." "Why?" Arthur demanded. "I'm a stranger. I'm rich. I have a closet full of fur coats upstairs. Why would you give me your jacket?" Leo looked down at his shoes, then back up at Arthur. His voice was small but steady. "Because you looked cold, sir. And Mommy says that when someone is cold, you give them a blanket, even if they're rich. Cold is cold." Arthur stared at the boy. Cold is cold. It was such a simple truth, such pure, uncomplicated logic from a child who understood what Arthur had forgotten. Human decency wasn't about wealth or status. It was about seeing someone in need and helping them. Arthur looked at Sarah. She was holding her breath, her face drained of color. "What is your name, son?" Arthur asked, his voice softening just a fraction. "Leo, sir." Arthur nodded slowly. He looked at the money in his hand. Then he looked at the open door of the library. A plan began to form in his mind. The test wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. This boy had passed the first level, the level of honesty. But Arthur wanted to know more. He wanted to know if this was just a fluke, or if this boy truly possessed a heart of gold. He wanted to see if pressure would break them. Arthur shoved the money into his inside jacket pocket. "You woke me up," Arthur grunted, returning to his grumpy persona. "I hate being woken up." Sarah let out a small sob. "We're leaving, sir." "No," Arthur said sharply. "We're leaving, sir," Sarah repeated, grabbing Leo's hand and turning toward the door. "Stop!" Arthur's voice cracked like a whip across the silent room. Sarah froze. She didn't dare take another step. She turned around slowly, her face completely drained of color. "I didn't say you could leave," Arthur growled. He pointed a shaking finger at the velvet armchair where he had been sitting. "Look at this." Sarah looked. There was a small, dark, damp spot on the burgundy fabric where Leo's wet jacket had rested. "My chair," Arthur said, his voice dripping with fake anger. "This is imported Italian velvet. It costs $200 a yard, and now it's wet. It's ruined." I will dry it, sir," Sarah stammered. I'll get a towel right now." "Water stains velvet," Arthur lied, standing up and leaning heavily on his cane. He loomed over the terrified mother. "You can't just dry it. It needs to be professionally restored. That will cost $500. Sarah stared at the spot, then at Arthur. Tears streamed down her face. "Mr. Sterling, please," she begged. "I don't have $500. I haven't even been paid for this month yet. Please, take it out of my wages. I'll work for free."
New sports car or a vacation house. They never gave him anything. They only took. But this 7-year-old boy, who had nothing, was willing to give up everything. Arthur's heart, which had been frozen for so many years, suddenly cracked wide open. The pain was sharp and immediate, like ice breaking in spring. He realized that this boy, who had nothing, was richer than Arthur would ever be. Arthur had millions in the bank, but he would never sacrifice his favorite possession for anyone. He had become so consumed by protecting what was his that he'd forgotten what it meant to give. The silence stretched out. The rain continued to hammer against the windows. Sarah was crying silently, her shoulders shaking. Arthur picked up the toy car with trembling hands. His fingers, gnarled with age, closed around it gently. "You?" Arthur's voice was no longer a growl. It was a whisper, thick with emotion. "You would give me this for a wet chair?" Leo nodded, his chin trembling slightly, but his voice steady. "Yes, sir. Is it enough?" Arthur closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet with tears. Real tears. Tears he hadn't cried in decades. "Yes, Leo," Arthur whispered, his voice breaking. "It is enough. It is more than enough." Arthur slumped back into his chair. The act was over. He couldn't play the villain anymore. He felt tired, not from age, but from the weight of his own guilt and shame. "Sarah," Arthur said, and his voice had changed completely. It became the voice of a tired, lonely old man who'd been wearing a mask for far too long. "Sit down." "Sir?" Sarah looked confused by the sudden change in his tone. "I said, sit down," Arthur repeated, then softened. "Please, just sit. Stop looking at me like I'm going to eat you." Sarah hesitantly sat on the edge of the sofa, pulling Leo onto her lap protectively. Arthur looked at the toy car in his hand. He spun the remaining wheels with his thumb, watching them turn. "I have a confession to make," Arthur said, looking at the floor. His shoulders sagged. "The chair isn't ruined. It's just water. It will dry in an hour." Sarah let out a breath she'd been holding. "Oh, thank God." "And," Arthur continued, looking up at them with intense, tired eyes, "I wasn't asleep." Sarah's eyes went wide. You weren't?" "No." Arthur shook his head slowly. "I was pretending. I left that money on the table on purpose. I wanted to see if you would steal it. I wanted to catch you in the act." Sarah pulled Leo tighter against her chest. She looked wounded, betrayed. "You were testing us? Like we're rats in a maze?" "Yes," Arthur admitted, his voice heavy with shame. "I am a bitter old man, Sarah. I thought everyone was a thief. I thought everyone had a price." Arthur pointed a shaking finger at Leo, but this time there was no anger in the gesture, only awe. "But him?" Arthur's voice broke completely. "He didn't take the money. He covered me because he thought I was cold. He protected my belongings. And then he offered me his father's car." Arthur wiped a tear from his cheek. He didn't care that his maid was watching him cry. He didn't care about maintaining the cold, powerful image anymore. "I have lost my way," Arthur whispered. "I have all this money, all this power, but I am poor. I am spiritually bankrupt. You have nothing, Sarah, but you raised a king." Arthur stood up slowly, using his cane for support. He walked over to the fireplace and took a deep breath, staring into the flames. He turned back to them, and for the first time in years, there was light in his eyes. "The test is over," Arthur announced, "and you passed, both of you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the thick envelope of money. He walked over to Sarah and held it out with both hands, like an offering. "Take this," Arthur said. Sarah shook her head vigorously. "No, sir, I don't want your money. I just want to work. I want to earn my keep honestly." "Take it," Arthur insisted, his voice gentle but firm. "It's not charity. It's a bonus. It's payment for the lesson your son just taught me, a lesson I desperately needed to learn."
Sarah hesitated. She looked at the money, then at Leo's worn-out shoes with the holes in the toes. She looked at her own hands, rough and red from years of scrubbing floors. "Please," Arthur said softly, and there was genuine humility in his voice. "Buy the boy a warm coat. Buy him new shoes. Buy yourself a bed that doesn't hurt your back. Take it." Sarah reached out with a trembling hand and took the envelope. Fresh tears rolled down her cheeks. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," she whispered. "Thank you so much." "Don't thank me yet," Arthur said, and a small, genuine smile touched his lips for the first time in years. "I have a business proposition for you, Leo." Leo looked up, his eyes bright with curiosity. "For me?" "Yes," Arthur said. He held up the little toy car, Fast Eddie, turning it carefully in his weathered hands. "I'm going to keep Fast Eddie. He's mine now. You gave him to me as payment, and a deal is a deal." Leo's face fell slightly, but he nodded with understanding. "Okay, a deal is a deal." "But," Arthur continued, kneeling down with great effort, his old knees protesting, "I can't drive a car with 3 wheels. I need a mechanic. Someone to help me fix things around here. Someone to help me fix myself." Leo tilted his head, confused but listening. "Leo," Arthur's voice was warm now, stripped of all its earlier harshness. "How would you like to come here every day after school? You can sit in this library. You can do your homework at that big desk by the window. You can have hot chocolate and cookies. And you can teach this grumpy old man how to be kind again, how to laugh again, how to be human again." Arthur paused, letting the words sink in. "In exchange," Arthur continued, "I will pay for your school, all your books, all your supplies, all your tuition. And not just elementary school, Leo, middle school, high school, and when you're ready, college. Any college you want. I will pay for everything. Deal?" Leo looked at his mother. Sarah was crying openly now, her hands covering her mouth. She couldn't speak, but she nodded vigorously, giving Leo permission. Leo looked back at Arthur. A smile spread across his face, a gap-toothed, beautiful, innocent smile that lit up the entire glooming library. "Deal," Leo said. He held out his small hand. Arthur Sterling, the billionaire who trusted no one, who had spent decades building walls around his heart, took the small hand in his own and shook it firmly. "Deal," Arthur repeated, his voice thick with emotion. In that moment, something miraculous happened. The cold, empty mansion that had been Arthur's prison for so long suddenly felt like a home. And the test that Arthur had designed to prove that everyone was greedy had instead proven something far more powerful. That even in the darkest heart, a small act of kindness can plant a seed of redemption. Arthur had set a trap for a thief, but he had caught an angel instead. 10 years passed. The Sterling mansion was no longer a dark, silent place. The heavy curtains were always open now, letting the sunlight pour in. The garden, once overgrown and thorny, was full of bright flowers that bloomed year-round. On a warm Sunday afternoon, the library was full of people, but it wasn't a party. It was a gathering of lawyers, businessmen, and a young man named Leo. Leo was 17 now. He was tall, handsome, and wearing a crisp suit. He stood by the window, looking out at the garden, where his mother, Sarah, was arranging flowers. Sarah didn't look tired anymore. She looked happy, peaceful. She was now the head of the Sterling Foundation, managing millions of dollars given to charity every year. She had become one of the most respected philanthropists in the city. The room was quiet because the lawyer was reading the last will and testament
of Mr. Arthur Sterling. Arthur had passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 days ago. He had died in the burgundy armchair, the same one where the test had happened 10 years before. Arthur's biological children were there, 2 sons and a daughter. They sat on the other side of the room, looking impatient. They checked their watches, they whispered to each other about selling the house and splitting the fortune. They didn't look sad, they looked greedy. The lawyer, Mr. Henderson, cleared his throat. To my children, Mr. Henderson read from the document, I leave the trust funds that were established for you at birth. You have never visited me without asking for money, so I assume the money is all you desire. You have your millions. Enjoy them. The children grumbled, but they seemed satisfied. They stood up to leave, not caring to hear the rest. Wait, Mr. Henderson said firmly, there's more. They stopped and turned around. To the rest of my estate, the lawyer continued, my companies, this mansion, my investments, and my personal savings, I leave everything to the one person who gave me something when I had nothing. The children stopped dead in their tracks. They turned around, confused and suddenly alert. Who? One son demanded. We're his family. I leave it all, the lawyer read clearly, to Leo. The room erupted in shouting. The sons were furious. They pointed at Leo, their faces red with rage. Him? They yelled. The maid's son? This is a joke. He tricked our father. He manipulated a senile old man. Leo didn't move. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, holding something in his hand, rubbing it with his thumb. The lawyer raised his hand for silence. Mr. Sterling left a letter explaining his decision, Mr. Henderson said. He wanted me to read it to you. The lawyer unfolded a handwritten note, Arthur's final words. To my children and to the world. You measure wealth in gold and property. You think I am giving Leo my fortune because I have gone mad. But you are wrong. I am paying a debt. The lawyer continued reading Arthur's words. 10 years ago, on a rainy Saturday, I was a spiritual beggar. I was cold, lonely, and empty. A 7-year-old boy saw me shivering. He didn't see a billionaire. He saw a human being. He covered me with his own jacket. He protected my money when he could have stolen it. But the true debt was paid when he gave me his most prized possession, a broken toy car, to save his mother from my anger. He gave me everything he had, expecting nothing in return. The lawyer's voice softened as he read the final lines. That day, he taught me that the poorest pocket can hold the richest heart. He saved me from dying as a bitter, hateful man. He gave me a family. He gave me 10 years of laughter, noise, and love. So I leave him my money. It's a small trade, because he gave me back my soul. The lawyer finished reading. Silence filled the room. The lawyer looked at Leo. Mr. Sterling wanted you to have this. He handed Leo a small velvet box. Leo opened it with trembling hands. Inside, sitting on a cushion of white silk, was the old toy car. Fast Eddie. Arthur had kept it for 10 years. He had polished it carefully. He had even had a jeweler fix the missing wheel with a tiny piece of solid gold. Leo picked up the toy. Tears ran down his face. He didn't care about the mansion. He didn't care about the billions of dollars or the angry people shouting in the room. He missed his friend. He missed the grumpy old man who used to help him with his math homework, who taught him chess, who told him stories about building empires. Leo walked over to his mother. Sarah had come in from the garden. She hugged him tight. He was a good man, Leo, she whispered. He was, Leo replied, his voice breaking. He just needed a jacket. The angry children stormed out of the house, vowing to sue, but they knew deep down they would lose. The will was ironclad. Leo looked around the massive library. He looked at the empty armchair where Arthur used to sit. He walked over to it and placed the toy car with the gold wheel on the side table, right next to the lamp. Safe now, Leo whispered, repeating the words he had said 10 years ago. Leo grew up to be a different kind of billionaire. He didn't build walls, he built schools. He didn't hoard money, he used it to fix things, just like he had tried to fix Arthur's chair all those years ago. And every time someone asked him how he became so successful, Leo would smile, pull the battered toy car from his pocket, and say, I didn't buy my success, I earned it with kindness. So remember this, kindness is an investment that never fails. In a world where everyone is trying to take something, those who give are the ones who truly change the world. Arthur Sterling had all the money in the world, but he was poor until a child taught him how to love. Never underestimate the power of a small act of goodness. A jacket, a kind word, or a simple sacrifice can melt the coldest heart. When you give, do it without expecting anything in return, and life will reward you in ways money never can. If this story touched your heart, smash that like button and subscribe so you never miss stories that remind us what truly matters in life. Share this with someone who needs to remember that kindness always wins in the end. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.